Hi everybody, welcome back to the Desmo Works channel, and something a little different for you all today and something we've not done before. I've got a 848 engine that somebody wants me to strip down just to have a look at the overall condition of it internally and see what we can do with it. So it's been a seized engine on the head. We previously took the head apart to see what damage was in there, and we found some bent valves. The owner has sourced an alternative head. We're now going to take the engine apart and see what damage is in there internally, just to see whether or not it's straight put back together, put the new head on and get the engine up and running, or whether there's going to be further work needed. So as per usual, I'll take you through everything I do and my thought process on what needs doing inside the engine and why we need to do it. Let me show you the engine as it exists. So it's a bog standard 848 engine, and you'll have to excuse the dirt, but as we're taking it apart it will all be cleaned before it goes back together, and I'm not really fussed about if any of that gets internally because we'll stick it in the parts washer. That is the replacement head that's on the engine, so you'll see that because we've got some head studs missing there. And just to give you a little bit of a brief overview around the differences between the later testastretta engines that you'll find on the 848 and the 1098 and the 1198, just a discussion point that we've had. They've moved to plastic connectors on a lot of the water connection points. The ignition pickup actually sits as part of the engine case rather than the generator cover. You can see that there's a blanking point there. I should imagine that at some point they thought they were going to use it but didn't, so it sits there. And then obviously the head architecture and the cylinder architecture is slightly different, and once we get into the engine I'll point out any internal differences there. You've got less ribbing on the external cases, so they're quite smooth. I don't know if that's an improvement from the casting process, in that Ducati were much more comfortable on the strength of these castings over the earlier Desmo Quattros, but it's interesting to see that they've lost a lot of that ribbing that you would have seen on the earlier cases, which would have been there for strength purposes. So what we're going to do, take the engine apart obviously, but the first piece that we'll need to do is spin the engine round. Oh, by the way, off camera we've drained all the oil out and taken the oil filter off, and it's clear of water anyway, but we'll spin it round, we'll get the belts off. Once the belts are off, we'll then pop the heads off, and then standard strip down, we'll get the pistons out and cylinders off, cylinders off, then the pistons out, and then we'll split the cases by taking off the side covers, all of the internal gears, and then split the cases. Okay, let's get into this then. Okay, first piece we need to do is get the belt off. Much as any other Ducati engine, just a case of grunting and not being able to get that off. That was over tightened. Just pull the belt off now. Right, while we're here we'll also take off both of the fixed pulley wheels just to ensure that they're out of the way for us. As this head's already loose, I'm just going to re-pop this head off again. Going to remove the horizontal head now. So much like any other Ducati, we've just got four engine nuts, four head nuts securing the head in place along the studs. So let me grab the special tool and we'll just take those off. So loosen them in a cross pattern fashion. Do this one, then diagonally opposite, then down, then diagonally opposite again. Heads are off, and you can see where there was contact between the piston and the seized head that was replaced by the owner. Horizontal, no signs of impact damage. Doesn't look to be any particular issues at the top of the swept area, but we'll see once we get the cylinders off properly. So what I need to do is just remove coolant hoses, and then we'll just lift the cases, lift the cylinders off the cases. Okay, so we've now got off horizontal and vertical cylinders and pistons, and it would appear that this engine has had work done internally before, because we have polished conrods, which was expected or not expected?
Not expected.
Owner says not expected, so might be a little bit of a benefit. We'll have to look at the crank as well. So one of the key differences you'll notice on this slightly newer version of engine is we've got an oil sprayer for the bottom end of the piston that helps with piston cooling. Unfortunately though, we've got a corroded cylinder stud on the vertical cylinder. Not unsurprising, because they sit more in a way where you can collect water, and I've seen this even on the Desmo Quattro and early Testastretta engines as well. So not a surprise, just a little bit of a pain. So we will probably look to replace that stud, just because it will be weaker due to the corrosion that's already started and gone into the surface. Anything else that's worth discussing at this point? So same sort of setup as Desmo Quattro, so you've got an oil feed that does come up there as well to the head. Much like the earlier Testastrettas as well, there's a seal for the stud at the bottom, so this isn't on the Desmo Quattro engines. So quite interesting. Next step that we need to do is remove the side casings, and we've got a wet clutch set up on here as well, being an 848 engine. So when we take the clutch cover off, we've got a wet clutch in there that I'll also show you as well. Okay, so next step, as we are going to be fully stripping the engine down, I'm going to take the opportunity while we've got the engine in this state just to buzz off the lock nut for the pulleys, so that that's in a state that's easier to take off once we get the engine fully stripped down. So let me just quickly buzz that off. Okay, so off camera we've just taken a couple of plastic bits off. So we've taken the engine breather and its reed valve assembly, the ignition pickup sensor that was mounted in there. I've also taken it out of the engine stand just so it's a bit easier now to get to the side casings. So we are going to pop off the clutch cover side first. So much like Desmo Quattro engines and early Testastrettas, it's just a case of taking out the 6mm bolts that go all the way round, and then we'll pop the case off. Okay, we have got the side cover off of the clutch on the 848, and you'll see we've got the wet clutch set up, oil pump with its integral oil pressure relief valve, and the crank with its primary gear drive. Okay, we're going to take the clutch apart now. So first things first, let's take the front pressure plate off. So we'll take the 5 spring compression bolts out and pull the pressure plate off, remove all of the plates, and that will hopefully get us to the position where we can buzz off the nut that holds the clutch in place. Okay, let's take the oil pump off. 1 bolt, 1 bolt, 1 bolt. So I just used a So just use 3-leg puller to get that off. So that's the clutch side all stripped out. So we've taken the oil pump off, the primary drive gear, the primary gear and the wet clutch body. Okay, so we've moved across onto the alternator side. Pretty standard process, much like it was with Desmo Quattro and early testastretta engines. Just a case of taking all of the case bolts off and then using a removal tool to get it over the magnetic pull of the generator rotor. All I'm going to do now is just quickly buzz off the alternator nut using an impact gun, and then we'll disassemble all of the gears on this left hand side of the engine. Okay, starter gear is held in the same way as all of the earlier engines. Take this little circlip off and we'll pop the starter wheel off. Then the intermediate gear shaft, we just need to punch down this lock-in washer and then we'll buzz that nut off there as well. Okay, last piece on this side is getting the gear selector shaft off. Exactly the same as any of the other engines. You've got one 8mm bolt here and one 6mm bolt here, so let's just buzz those off quickly. Okay, so left hand side of the engine is completely stripped. The only bit that we've got left to do now is we're going to just pop the starter motor off, but as with all these things, it just depends on how far you're going to go down on your work as to whether you need to take that off. But if you're fully stripping the cases apart, take it off. And we've just got the key left in the intermediate timing shaft, and it's just really stuck in at the moment. Every time I tap it, it just pushes the shaft along, so I'll wait till I get the cases apart so that I can hold the shaft against something to be able to just tap that gently out. Just going to pop off the 2 bolts that are holding in the starter motor, and then we'll get the starter motor out, and then that's the left hand side of the engine ready to split the cases. A little bit stiff, but that comes off. Okay, so that's the intermediate timing gears removed. So on the right hand side, or the gears, the clutch side of the engine, we've removed everything. On the left hand side of the engine, or the alternator side of the engine, or generator if you want to call it generator as well, we've also removed everything. So all we need to do now is split the cases. So we've got to undo the main engine bolts as well as the case bolts. So case bolts are the ones on the periphery. Then the main engine bolts are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Flipping around this side, 8, 9. So let's undo those and get the cases split. Okay, quick double check just to ensure that I have got every single bolt. One last job, I'm just going to take off the detent spring so it doesn't come out under force. There you have it, the internals of a 848 engine. Gear cluster, pretty much the same as the Desmo Quattro and earlier testastretta engines. A little bit more lightening on the gear wheels. Crank is pretty much the same. Major difference is the oil cooling jets for the bottom of the pistons, but this one looks to be bent. All I'm going to do now, lift these components out and put them to one side so that we're ready to go for checking everything out. Okay, so that's the 848 engine stripped down. What I'm going to be doing now is just be doing some dimensional checks on all the components and advising the owner what needs replacing and what we can get away with just using. He's wanting this to be a very simple check over because of the seized head that was the vertical head, if I remember rightly. I'll correct that if that's wrong. So I'm going to check the crank and make sure that there's no damage in there and make sure it runs out correctly. If that's okay, quick check of the bearings, make sure that there's no rumbling or any untoward feeling in those. If all is good, reassemble the engine. He's not wanting to replace the mains unless I deem them as needing replacing, so he's hoping just to be able to get the engine back together and then focus on making sure that the replacement top end is right. Okay, thanks for watching this video. If there's any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Please like the video and share away, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and notification bell because there's plenty more content to come. Okay, thanks for watching. See you later. Cheers then. Bye.